we're looking at Numbers 15. It's a not real long lesson, but it was long enough, and the next one's longer, so I didn't want to put two together, because that'd make it real long. Next week's is a kind of long lesson. This lesson's in between two of the revolts. Last week, the people revolted against Moses and Aaron. Next week, we'll see another revolt. But in between, God is reminding them, he just laid the law down, okay? He told them, look, you guys complaining about all this stuff, I'm tired of it. None of y'all that's been here over 40 years old is going to make it into the promised land. So everybody under 40 would make it. I mean, would be able to make it. Now, some of them died in the wars and all this stuff. But, so, that's kind of tough on them. And he told them, you're going to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. And, you know, after you've just been wandering for a little over a year, and you're like, 40 years? That's going to be crazy. So he comes back and he tells them, look, I'm going to re-emphasize some of these offerings that I've given to you. All the way back in Exodus, he's already given some of these. So the first through fifth verse says, and the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, talking to Moses, of course, say unto them, when you have come into the land you are to inhabit, okay, 40 years from now, which I am giving to you, and you make an offering by fire to the Lord, a burnt offering or a sacrifice to fulfill a vow, or as a free will offering, or in your appointed feasts, to make a sweet aroma to the Lord from the herd or the flock, then he who presents his offering to the Lord shall bring a grain offering of 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with 1/4 of a hin of oil and 1/4 a hin of wine as a drink offering. You shall prepare with the burnt offering or the sacrifice for each lamb. So at this particular time, it's probably, Israel was probably, like I said, pretty dejected. So they just rebelled against God. God had told them, you're going to wander around for another 38 years, a little over 38 years, until this generation passes away. But he was merciful to them and said, this deals with the sacrifice to cover sin. So he's giving them, again, because he's telling them that's a sin, what you guys just did. So he's telling them now, this is an expression of thanksgiving that you can come back to me, that I will accept you. Okay? Even in the wilderness, they can do this. They have this. Now, it said, in the first part of it, says, when you come into the land. Okay, so they kind of put it off until they get there, but even while they're in the wilderness, they can still do some of these sacrifices. The grain with the drink offering and the wine meant to accompany the blood sacrifice that speaks of thanksgiving and joy. We really can have thanksgiving and joy even in the Lord, even if we're smarting from our own failure and from the loving correction of God. This passage also shows how God helped Israel. It read just like the passages of law, and so patiently instructed at Sinai. Now, after their failure at Kadesh Barnea, God's taking them back to school. You know, it's one of those things, it's when somebody doesn't learn something, you think, well, I need to do this again. I need to tell them again. You know, if you didn't understand the first time, I'm going to tell you again. And sometimes it seems like, to me, when somebody's talking and they repeat it like 3 times, I'm like, hey, I got it the first time. You know, quit talking about that. Go on to the next. But they said repetition is the way to enforce it. And they said when somebody is speaking, like a pastor or somebody meeting, just say it 3 times. Say it at least 3 times. Just something?
I just wonder what that noise was.
It's me. It's just.
No. Oh, it's you doing it?
Yeah. Well, it's
Oh.
bumping on me, I think. I didn't hear anything else. I didn't hear anything else. So.
Thank you.
Sure. 6 and 7, Brother Everson.
This is, or for a ram ye shall prepare as a grain offering 2/10 of an ephah and fine flour mixed with 1/3 of a hin of oil. And as a drink offering you shall offer 1/3 of a hin of wine as sweet aroma to the Lord.
Okay, before bring one of the flock of the herd, and it was a 10th ephah or ephah or whatever you want to say. Now it's more. So the bigger you get, the bigger offering you get, the more the wine and the wheat and the oil that you have to give. That's what it's saying. Make it proportional. So up there, it's a third of a hin of wine and a third of a hin of oil instead of a 10th. You want to try to read, or you want me to read for you?
I'll try.
Okay.
And when you prepare a young bull as a burnt offering or as a sacrifice to fulfill a vow or as a peace offering to the Lord, then shall be offered with the young bull a grain offering of 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with half a hin of oil, and you shall bring as the drink offering half a hin of wine as an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to the Lord.
Okay. So here again, it went from the ram that was bigger than the last one, the sheep. Now, a hen, that's a volume. Okay. Let's see.
Sorry, I asked, but I didn't know.
No, it is. It's a volume. I don't think it tells us that. I'd have to go back and look.
No, I'm just curious. Okay.
It's like a quart, I think. Let me see real quick while we're
You'll have to
looking.
look, I just was
Or
curious.
maybe they just left the key off.
No.
The end of
That would have been funny.
I can't do
or 10 of oil.
It would be a draw. That's funny.
I was wondering the same thing.
what?
Conversions, okay. Let's see, one value, one hen. Convert to U.S. measures. A hen is almost a gallon.
Oh, gosh.
It's 0.8 gallons.
Wow, I didn't
Yeah.
expect it to be that much.
Well, actually, that's dry. The liquid hen is 0.96, so it's all right at a gallon. A gallon of oil and a gallon of wine.
That's what I asked.
But it's only saying a third here, a third of that, so a third of a gallon.
I was thinking it was just a small amount.
Yeah. And then you want to know what an ephah is?
Wow.
Well, if you're going to cook a bull,
Yeah, I mean, it's like you're cooking a lot of meat, so
Wow.
Oh,
ephah. And they give it to you in liters, modern equivalents. Ephah.
And the, Ephah, E-P-H-A-H.
Ephah
Ephah.
or ephah is the same as a bath, B-A-T-H.
Oh.
It's 10 omers. Now you want to know what 10 omers is? An omer is 2 quarts.
Oh, wow.
So it's half gallon. 2 quarts, is that right?
4 quarts in a gallon.
4 quarts in a gallon.
They can do things small.
No, but it's like if you're going to eat a ram or a cow or whatever, it would be appropriate, the appropriate amount that you'd have. So each one of these, when they mix the flour with it, it wants to put the oil with that flour. And that's what you do. Whenever you make something, you make cookies. What do you usually do? You put some flour and some oil and some sweet stuff. We would put, whatever, peanut butter or oatmeal or whatever you're making. It's exactly what they're doing. So that's what he's telling. And this is for the sacrifice, for their sin, to get, God to accept their offering for that sin.
That says there, where it says the greater our sacrifice unto the Lord, the more thanksgiving and joy should come from the offering.
Right. The bigger it is. And it's one of those things, that's why so many things people get, when they have a lot and they give a lot, it's good. And I'm glad they can. But Jesus also saw the widow give her 2 mites. And that was all that she had. So she gave everything. Yeah, 100% of what she had. Or some of these others. The little lady that fixed Elijah, the cake, he said, "Oh, fix that for me." She was telling him, "Look, we're going to fix this, and me and my son's going to eat it, and we're going to die. Because this is all I got." And he goes, "No, fix it for me." And it's like, how dare you, But that's what they were doing. So we can't look upon it. God is trying to show them here there needs to be kind of and it's if they could afford it. Because you go back to the old part, back in Exodus, if you can't afford a cow, you get a ram or a sheep. If you can't afford that, you get a turtle. Or if you can't, or pigeon or something. It's whatever you could afford, that's what you're to give. And that's what it's kind of saying in this upper part here. 11 through 16, you want to read that for us, Bertha?
Thus it shall be done for each young bull, for each ram, for each lamb, or a young goat, according to the number that ye prepare. So you shall do with everyone according to their number. All who are native born shall do these things in this manner. In presenting an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to the Lord, and if a stranger dwells with you, or whoever is among you throughout your generations, and would present an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to the Lord, just as you do, so shall he do. One ordinance shall be for you of the assembly, and for the stranger who dwells with you, an ordinance forever throughout your generations. As you are, so shall the stranger be before the Lord. One law and one custom shall be for you and for the stranger who dwells with you.
Okay. So he's just expanding upon it, because a lot of people, like we said, there were some that came from Egypt that weren't native, what you'd call native Israelites. They were either Egyptians or other servants that was out there that was Egypt had captured and brought in, and they wanted to also serve God. They wanted to follow Moses, so they did. And he's saying, you need to treat these people the same. Now, there are conditions, that go with that being part of it. You got to follow our laws. Part of the law is if you're a man, you got to get circumcised, and all these different things that they got to follow. So, but if they sin, then they have to follow these same laws that the people do, exact people do. There's not 2 different sets for the different type of people.
Well, they said uncomplicated.
Yeah, it brings it down to one thing. It says, everyone who made a sacrifice had to bring it with the thanksgiving of grain and the joy of wine. God did not want griping sacrifices brought to him. If one could not serve the Lord with gladness, then God didn't want his service at all. I think I probably told it once before. I had a guy I knew a long time ago, and he was a deacon in their church. Well, their deacons was kind of rotating. They took the offering. That's about all they did. That's what I understood. So somebody asked him when he took the offering, did he put his 10% in? And he goes, 10%? I put about $20 in every week. Is that good enough?
Oh my gosh.
It's just, it's funny. Some people, how they react. That's what they were brought up on. They wasn't taught that way. Well, that's the way somebody brought in from, outside of Israel. I have to give a ram? I have to give a bull? That's crazy. What do I have to do that for? Well, if you're going to be part of us, this is what you have to do. It's part of it.
Because you want to obey the Lord.
That's right. That's what the Lord has asked for. Because you sinned against his law, against what he said. Verse 17. Again the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When you come into the land to which I bring you, then it will be, when you eat the bread of the land, that you shall offer up a heave offering to the Lord. You shall offer up a cake of the first of your ground meal as a heave offering of the threshing floor. So shall you offer it. Of the first of your ground meal you shall give to the Lord a heave offering throughout your generations. Now, we talked about this a little bit back when we talked about Exodus. They had the wave offerings and then the heave offerings, and it's kind of more or less the same, but there were different things that you did. Here, he's telling them that when you get to the land, okay, get into Canaan, and you plant your first crops, that first crops, when you bring it out and you start grinding that grain, the first bread you make, that first cake's mine. Okay? You make that cake, and that comes to the priest, and they offer that up. And if you remember, back in Exodus, the priest and the priest would hand the bread back to him, and both of them either would raise it up. Somehow he was involved with that. So it's saying that I'm giving you what? The first fruits. This is the first fruits of the land. And that's why it goes through all of this. And that's why we say when you get your check, pay your tithes first, pay your offerings first, and then you'll have, the rest of it is what the Lord has given you. The rest of it, God will take care of it for you. So this sets in their minds a forward to the promise. Even if a child of God isn't walking in the riches of God's promises now, they need to set their mind on heavenly places. Paul told the church in Ephesus that God has raised us up together and made us to sit together in heavenly places in Christ Jesus, even if it doesn't feel like it now. And it sure don't feel like it now. But, yeah, that's something that, I don't know, I was in The Chosen when we watched it, and I've watched it 2 or 3 times since then. When you get to the point where Lazarus was brought back, and then he was talking to Thomas about not bringing Raymond back, one of those things. He's having those issues. But it said it in such a way that we're living our life now, same life we're going to be living in heaven. Because our bodies will change, whether it goes through death or through the rapture. But we're living just like that. It's eternal. That's why we'll see no death. Yeah, we'll pass through the physical death, but we won't see the final death. And I don't know, I've watched that several times, and it's just like a light bulb come off in my head. It's like we need to live like we're living in heaven now. Yeah, I don't feel like it. A lot of times. We feel all the pains and the groans, and I just replaced a tire in my truck last week. The truck only had 15,000 miles, and I got a nail in it. I got in the car tonight, pulled out, got 10-pound low pressure on my van tire. Like, oh, another tire? So I'm gonna have to watch it for a few days and see. I may have to go get another tire. You know, some of these things come upon us because we're living in this world. This world's fallen.
You know, I was thinking when you said that about Israel, even though there was a lot of them, died during that period of
Right.
time. Now, all the ones 40 and over died.
Yeah.
But,
There's still some
we
of
still
it.
have to live. We
That's
still
right.
live in this world, and even though, but when we look at dying again, it's harder on us that are left behind.
Right.
But at the same time, they've already crossed that line.
Uh-huh.
They've crossed that time into eternity.
Yeah. And it's, we'll see when we get there. I can't fathom. Oh, you want to read that next long one, Brother Emerson? 22 through 29?
If you sin unintentionally and do not observe all these commandments which the Lord has spoken to Moses, all that the Lord has commanded you by the hand of Moses, from the day the Lord gave commandments and onward throughout your generations, then it will be, if it is unintentionally committed without the knowledge of the congregation, and the whole congregation shall offer one young bull as a burnt offering, as a sweet aroma to the Lord, with its grain offering and drink offering according to the ordinances, and one kid of goat as a sin offering, so that the priest shall make atonement for the whole congregation of the children of Israel, and it shall be forgiven them, for it was unintentional. They shall bring their offering, an offering made by the fire of the Lord, and their sin offering before the Lord for their unintended sin. It shall be forgiven the whole congregation of the children of Israel, and the stranger who dwells among them, because all the people did it unintentionally. And if a person sins unintentionally, then he shall bring a female goat in its first year as a sin offering. Excuse me. So the priest shall make atonement for the person who sins unintentionally, when he sins unintentionally before the Lord, to make an atonement for him, and it shall be forgiven him. He shall have one law for him who sins unintentionally, for him who is native born among the children of Israel, and for the stranger who dwells among them.
Okay. So this is talking about the whole congregation, the first part. If they sin unintentionally, there's got to be, and that's why they have, during the year, they'll have an offering that's made for the people, just in case somebody sinned and they didn't know it. If a person sins and they did, it's like you didn't know it. It's you know it afterwards. You found out afterwards. Oh, that was a sin. Then you got to go and make an offering for it. And he's making the difference here between an intentional and unintentional. In the next scripture, a few scriptures, he'll tell us something else here. But so this is for those that sin unintentionally. He said, many today think and live as if an action is unintentional. It cannot be sin. But many of the worst sins are committed with the best of intentions. Intentions matter nothing when the result is sin. We have to be careful with that, because we can run over somebody, not with a car, but I mean with our words, and run them down, and there's no call for that. That can be a sin if you hurt somebody bad enough, if you make them go sin. Especially in the 20th century, all sorts of horrific atrocities and terror have been committed by those dedicated to honorable causes. Communism sought to establish a just and fair economy where each worked according to his ability and received according to his need, and became the instrument of genocide of tens of millions of people. one of the things that if you want to be what the church had after Christ left during the early days of the apostles, when everyone was giving to a common need. The church that is trying to raise up the church. That's, quote, people point at that and say, oh, that's communism. Well, there had a need and everybody contributed what they could. Some people had more and some people had less. Again, the deal with Annas and Sapphira, they had more. They intentionally sinned when they said, well, we're giving this much. With Barnabas, he gave what he had, his land. He may have had more land to give. We don't know. It's not told us, but he gave some land. I think it was Barnabas. And it was fine, but when Annas and Sapphira gave it, they lied. And because of that, they died. So there's a difference between intentional and unintentional. So today in the church, many a gossip or talebearer or many a divisive person will claim the best of intentions, even if we agree that they are right intentions. They still may be in grievous sin. The same applies for a myriad of other sins we are often ready to ignore or think lightly of, all on the basis of, after all, they had good intentions. So if they said, what was it, the Southern way to, maybe it was the Baptist way to, you're talking to somebody, oh, bless your little heart. You know, it's like you're calling them down, you know. Anyway. So because of that, it needs a blood atonement, the whole congregation. A bull had to be sacrificed when the nation as a whole was guilty, and a female goat had to be sacrificed when an individual was guilty. And here again it says that it's the same whether it's one of the people or somebody outside. There's no difference in sin. 30 through 31. Go ahead and read that, Iris.
But the person who does anything presumptuously, whether he is a native born or a stranger, that one brings reproach on the Lord, and he shall be cut off from among his people. Because he has despised the word of the Lord and has broken his commandment, that person shall be completely cut off. His guilt shall be upon him.
Okay. There is a difference. Going back and looking at the laws that they had, it was saying if you had a bull that, you know, gored somebody, then you need to go kill the bull and everything. If it gored somebody before and you hadn't pinned him up, then you're going to die because you got to take care of, you know, your people. Well, here it says that such sin was not to be tolerated in Israel when somebody committed a sin. This command was a cultural mechanism for addressing this sin and ensuring that such arrogant flaunting of public morality would not be rewarded. Today, it's in contrast with what we have. Flagrant sinners are rewarded with fame and fortune. Instead of his guilt shall be upon him, our society put guilt on anyone who would judge or condemn such a deprived individual by calling what they do evil. We see a lot of that today. Okay, 32. Here's an example of the intentional sin. Okay, go ahead.
Now, while the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. And those who found him gathering sticks brought him to Moses and Aaron to tell the congregation. They put him under guard because it had not been explained what should be done to him. Then the Lord said to Moses, the man must surely be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones outside the camp. So as the Lord commanded Moses, all the congregation brought him outside the camp and stoned him with stones, and he died.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, it's you know, it seems tough. It seems like it's too much. All he did was gather sticks. But
Kind of like overreaction.
how many times we've been through Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers, and how many times have they been told the Sabbath is not for any work? You don't do any work. So they've been told this over and over and over again. So this guy, whether he was sick the day before and couldn't get him any sticks to make him some fire, to cook him a meal, or whatever it was, he should have just asked his neighbor or whatever he was doing, because that was, they're going to take it against him. That's a sin. You can't do that. And boy, am I glad I don't live under the law. I mean, here again, it just, that's tough. That's really harsh.
I thought, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, they knew.
Yeah, they knew.
Sometimes we since we live under grace and God is long suffering, we sometimes think we're getting away with it.
Yeah.
We're not.
No, we're not. I think hopefully, as long as we have that, I didn't do that, or you have that fear in you that you talk about, that I don't want to do anything that would hurt, anybody. God wants us to have, just like he's saying, love the Lord thy God with all his soul, mind, and heart. Love your neighbor as yourself, and that should take care of it. So.
And then he knew the law.
Yeah. And the last scriptures here is 37. And again, the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel. Tell them to make tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and to put a blue thread in the tassels of the corners. And you shall have the tassel, that you may look upon it, and remember the commandments of the Lord, and do them. And that you may not follow the harlotry to which your own heart and your own eyes are inclined, and that you may remember and do all my commandments, and be holy for your God. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God. So here he's telling them to put some reminders on their clothing. So every morning when they get up, put that on. They'll see that little blue thread or blue tassel or whatever it is. Now today we don't have that, of course, but the Jews today, they still have that. They'll have the tassels that hang down on their robes, and it reminds them of 613 different laws that they have to remember. That's where they get this from. Up until this time, I don't think there were 613 laws, but they're added on to as they go on and on. These were intended to remind Israel to whom they belong. They were to God's people. And these reminders are an effective preventative remedy for sin. What do we do sometimes when we don't want to forget something? The old adage is kind of string around your finger. You forget what you was, but you start looking at that finger. Why I got that? Oh yeah, I'll remember. Well, now I got to write down what I put. Well, I put the finger and the string around my finger. I just don't remember anymore. I walk in the room, turn around, and come back. I get most of my steps in that way. I think I've said that before. Because I walk across the hall and walk across down the hall, and I'm like, oh crap, what am I doing? I was going to do something. And the blue thread, it's special. The blue was part of the Ark of the Covenant that they made, the tabernacle. It was part of that covering. They used blue in it. So, and it's, I don't say expensive, but it wasn't, they didn't want to put a lot in there, but it was still a reminder. That's part of a reminder of God's covenant, his commandments that he had. It says, we might imagine an Israelite being tempted into some kind of sin and then catching sight of his own garments, reminding him of whom he was and reminding him that others could see who he is. A child of God and not a child of the sin he is contemplating. Paul talked about there too that we, under the law, if we eat meats that are offered to idols and somebody sees us eating meats and they think that we've been participating in that, that's going to make them fall. So don't do that. But he said it's not that the meat's bad or that doing it's bad. You are having an influence on somebody else. So if you do it in yourself and nobody sees it, fine. It's not a sin to you. But if somebody else sees you do it and they fail because they go do it and they think, oh, I see the pastor going in there and they got a bar in there. Now you must be going drinking. Well, no, just about every restaurant you got now here in Oklahoma has a section. If you want to drink, you go over there. So you can't get away from it hardly anymore for certain things. That you just have to be careful with what you're doing.
I sure wouldn't want God to dump me on the head and mine. That might hurt.
Well, I appreciate everybody coming out tonight.
Appreciate you teaching too.
Go ahead and shut this off.